Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's roundtable discussion called Making the Case for Change. We're really excited that you can join us for this Workday and Avaap sponsored conversation or co-sponsored conversation. Today, you're going to hear from Workday and Avaap's customers, Miami University of Ohio and the University of Akron, regarding why change management was key to their ERP project success. Our customer speakers are going to talk about the lessons they learned through their transformation journeys. And we're going to talk beyond just traditional training and communication strategies. We're going to hear from the customer speakers. How did they develop their OCM strategy? How did they build strong change champion networks, engage their leadership effectively, just to name a few topics. Before I turn things over to our facilitators today, I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Amy Lahate. I lead our higher education sales practice at Avaap. I've been working with institutions to help them select and implement and optimize ERP solutions for the past 25 years. Actually started my career in student services, spent 14 years at Ellucian implementing SIS systems and managing Banner and colleague clients, and then moved over to the Workday ecosystem in 2017, and I haven't looked back since. So I wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items for us today. So this session is going to be recorded. We're going to distribute the link in the deck to all of you by early next week. Our discussion is going to be led by our facilitators. So you all will be on mute and you can post questions in the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat. And depending on how much ground we cover, we do hope to have an open Q&A session where we can take you all off mute towards the end of the session. There should also be an option for you to turn on closed captioning in the Zoom session if that's something you want to try out. And I also just want to take a moment to do a couple thank yous. I want to thank our colleagues at Workday for co-sponsoring today's session with us. We really appreciate the partnership and for helping to spread the word and bringing us all together today. And last but not least, I want to thank today's facilitators and Miami University and University of Akron for sharing their knowledge and expertise today. So quick 30-second commercial on Avaap for those of you who don't know much about us. We're a Workday certified implementation partner since 2016. We have over 400 consultants who provide end-to-end technology transformation services, as you can see, from ERP project readiness through implementation to post-production support and beyond. We've been partnering with higher ed institutions for the past 20 years on all different types of transformation initiatives. There's a snapshot here where you can see some of the institutions we've worked with over the years, all different types, private, public, large or small, in our Workday implementation. Some of those are in the middle. If you'd like to learn more about Avaap, I've included some additional information on our consultancy on the back of this deck, and also my contact information, so you can feel free to reach out. So the last thing I wanted to point out is that today's conversation is actually part of a larger roundtable series that Avaap is co-sponsoring with Workday through the fall in early 2025 called Pivot to Workday. So the goal of the series is for us to be able to provide you monthly ways to engage, webinars, roundtable discussions that will focus on helping your institution evaluate a move to Workday, prepare for that, become educated on what you need to do to successfully implement Workday. We're also going to be offering special packages and pricing as part of the series, and I'll share more information about that at the end of our conversation. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to today's facilitators so they can kick us off. And Analia and Julia, it's over to you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Analia Amaro. I apologize for having camera issues this morning, but I am so excited to be with you. And as you can tell, I am wonderful friends with my joint facilitator, Julia Filia. We have worked together for well over a decade, and I'm sure that she will share some of her background. I have been with Avaap for 5 years and oversee our higher education, customer success, and innovation processes, and highly focused on Workday, having come from the client side with more than, I like to say, just stopping at 29 years experience. It's where I stopped counting of higher education. Julia, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into some of our questions and introduce our panelists.
Sure. Good afternoon, colleagues. Julia Filial, as Analia mentioned, she was nice to say that we've worked together. I really just follow her around because she gives me fantastic advice as a mentor. But yes, Analia and I have worked together for a long time. I've been at Avaap though for 3 years. I have the honor of leading our Workday OCM practice and have the opportunity to work with some really amazing institutions like the two you're going to hear from today. Happy to be here. Spent 20 years in education, higher education, prior to joining Avaap. So enough about me. Analia, I'll hand it back to you so we can hear from our colleagues.
Great. So, speaking of which, we have two amazing institutions joining us today and two amazing representatives. I think you'll understand why in just a few minutes. Sarah, I want to go to you first. Would you please give a brief introduction and we'll talk about your project in a little bit, but let's talk about you and what you've done for the project.
Okay, that sounds great. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Persinger, and I was the change management lead on the platform implementation project. Been at Miami University for close to, well, over 19 years, got here in 2005, and I've been in the finance and business services area the entire time in a variety of roles, from functional user to technology assistant to controller, back to technology assistant and change lead. So that's me in a nutshell. And then I'm going to assume that we will turn it over to Chris next, Analia.
Yes, I think you in a nutshell may also be fun in a nutshell. So we're going to talk about that too during today. Chris, why don't you tell us a little about you and your role on the project at Akron?
Let's go to the no fun then. No, I'm just kidding. Chris Muller, Director of Application at the University of Akron. I've been there about 7 years. Before that, I was at a rival school, Kent State, right down the road for several years. Been in higher ed since 2001. And once I started in higher ed, loved it. Never wanted to go anywhere else. I've been in applications all my career as a developer, business analyst, report analyst, until I got into leadership, and now I'm the director at Akron. For the project, I was the change management lead also. That I would, and you'll hear on my examples, I shared that with our leadership team. We had a great leadership team that we collaborated and fit in wherever we needed to when people were out or not available. So, but I was the named OCM lead, worked hand in hand with Julia here. So look forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Chris. And you've already kind of let the cat out of the bag that one of the themes that you will hear several times during our time together is how important it is to have executive leadership connections throughout the project. So thank you for starting us on that theme. So let's move on and talk a little bit more about the projects in more depth. And I'll go back to you, Sarah. Why don't you give us an overview of your transformation journey and your timeline?
Sure, absolutely. So we actually, and I think the next slide is going to give you kind of that starting point, but we went live. We're on our 90 days post go live with Workday platform. We did the full suite, finance, HR, HCM core, everything. We've got some phase X projects going. So I'll talk about those in a little bit if you want to hear about them. But we started basically phase 0 in January of 23. We hit our go live for platform July of 24. That was a long 18 months fully involved with over about 150 of the Miami team engaged and our counterparts at Avaap. So basically having some hand-in-hand conversations, each of our leads and sub-leads having a representative with Avaap. So again, here's the project, here's some of our information. I don't want to take too long, but I will say that I dropped off the project for change management to continue with platform support post go live. There's another change manager full-time on the project for our student go live. And you can see on the slide there that we have our, and you may or may not know, but there's 2 distinct go live phases within a student project. And so we have a move to production that's going to be fall of 2025 and a final move to production that's going to be spring of 2026. And we'll be fully on Workday at that point with all of our financial, HR, payroll, and student activities.
I'd like to point out here, Sarah, though, you don't get away from the student implementation. While we might have a new OCM lead, we have Sarah as our guide and our dotted line to you, Sarah. So
thank you. Yes, I am. I have asked, and we'll talk about change champions later. I have asked, can I please be engaged in the project as a change champion or a SME in some cases? So I love to help people and I love to share my knowledge. And I've gained a bunch over the time that we've had this this project in play from our Avaap counterparts and from our other, we've had meetings with Chris and Akron and some of our other counterparts across Ohio and other higher ed institutions. So it's just a wonderful community of sharing information, and we want to pay it forward to anybody that's coming after us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. Let's look at some of those lessons learned as we talk about paying it forward. And maybe you could talk about how change was key to your success. And I know, Julia, you were heavily involved and embedded with this. So please tag team and Sarah, share your experiences.
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm going to leave those just up on the screen for a couple of minutes. What I will say, first and foremost, the project, the leadership on the project, our executive sponsors, our steering team from the day one, even before day one, they invested in the change management part of the project. They did not just go for the deployment. And without that, I don't think we would have been as successful as we have been with the go live. So if you're in the process of thinking about this, make sure that you are, it's largely a part of our success. So we'll talk about some of our platform deployment and some of the things that we have learned along the way. We were on Banner. I'm not sure if anybody that's on the call is a Banner school, is changing over from that. We've been on Banner since 1999, so you know that the system is very not flexible. We knew steps. We didn't know context behind the steps. We knew keystrokes. So our lesson learned and our kind of our pay it forward is know what you're doing. Understand the context behind those actions that you're taking in the system. And that's across the board, all the offices, not just a few subject matter experts. Make sure that you start early and often knowing and understanding so that you don't just say, oh, I need to make this replication in our new system. Why do you do that process? We've got some conversations about depth of coverage for your leads and your sub leads. I fortunately was able to be pulled from my full-time job and devoted 100% to the Workday project. Our project manager was also that way, but some of the leads on the project were not, and they found themselves doing 2 and 3 times work. They called it their day job and their workday job, and it was a little bit stressful for those areas. And so our depth of coverage is a big one that we want to make sure that people engage and invest in, because it is also hugely impactful to the success of the project. And then making sure that you start knocking down those silos, and I think Chris is going to say the same thing. You basically have to make sure that you collaborate across all of the work streams. You cannot just do this in a vacuum. You can't just have HCM doing their part and finance doing their part. The change management, again, kind of thinking about, we had our folks across campus, they wanted to see the system. We couldn't give them the system because the way the project goes, it's being built, right? So we had to kind of talk them through some of those things. We could have done that a little bit better. That's one of my lessons learned, and one of my pay it forwards is try to get some conceptualizations and some mock-ups, even if you can, in front of the people to talk about how do you use the system and what might you need to think about changing that mindset before you actually see hands-on. Oh my God, this is totally different. What do I do? All right. And so then I kind of have 2 other parts here that I'll say, and then I'll stop talking. But that full support model, think it through what you're going to do to support the system, and make sure that the folks that need to support the system, if they're not part of the project team, make sure they understand how the system works and what decisions are made and how the whole implementation has gone. They may not be in all those daily meetings, but they sure need to be able to support the system. And so think about that support model that you're going to put into place. And the leadership, for sure, the leadership team was critical to us. We have many standing meetings and lots of updates. The top down had our back. Basically, any of the decisions that the leads made, their management was on board with and supported any of those decisions. Okay, that's a lot, so I'll turn it over.
Sarah, I'd actually like to jump in here if I may, because I want to underscore something that you said and just testify to it, because I've been part of it. So since the fall of 2022, before Miami even kicked off their project, their leadership team understood that this was not just a technology deployment, and that this was really a people project, and made the commitment to having a really strong OCM change management engagement on the project. You heard Sarah talk about that she was fully engaged. Sarah was everywhere on this project, not just our OCM lead. She was with the functional teams, she was with the change champions, she was doing the testing, she was doing the training, she was doing all of that. And that is fantastic that Miami was able to do that. You're going to hear a little bit of a different model when Chris speaks from Akron. But what I do want to just share is that even with Sarah full-time, Miami knew that the bandwidth of their team was going to need additional support, right? And that's where they really look to Avaap for that supplementary, complementary support, and really helping to build out what those different stakeholder engagements and communications and trainings would be. And I think another thing that Sarah said, and this is so important from a leadership perspective, is to understand the culture at the campus. Miami, they wanted to get in there. They wanted to get into the system. They were eager beavers in a fantastic way, right? So it's really how do we help balance what's happening from a configuration standpoint from Workday, and then at what point do we really bring those people along? And also, as Sarah said, another lesson learned. Let's bring them on sooner in student when appropriate, when we can do those demonstrations. So really just want to applaud and reinforce that the Miami leadership knew from the beginning that they needed a strong OCM presence to supplement what Sarah was already really good at doing.
So Sarah, that you talked about how important that engagement is. How did leadership make the case for how important it was to include change management? Because sometimes when you go through a project, they focus on the deployment of the technology. And as we all know, this is a people project. And if they don't use the technology, the project fails. So how did they make that case that they understood how critical this was?
Okay, you're going to hate this answer, but that part of the case was decided before I got pulled into early on, right? But I will say that they knew that we couldn't do it on our own. We've never been through an implementation this big with this system, right? We knew that we had to have help. We knew that we had to use those services within our contract for the Avaap OCM team as well. So those partnerships that we had. So I say I'm sorry that that's the answer, but I know that they recognized early in the building even of the project and the contract that we had to have that change management focus. We couldn't have just done this with a project manager team, and the project manager couldn't have done those change activities on their own either. So I hope that that's an okay answer for the group.
Of course it is. Yeah, there certainly is that difference in culture where those go into a project understanding how critical it is from the beginning, and others learn maybe they should have focused on it a little more as they go. I know that we have a question, and I will come to that. We'll handle some of the questions that have come in, but I want to go to Chris and give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about Akron's project and your timeline and the things that you all have realized from your project, and talk about some of your lessons learned, and then we'll combine and bring Sarah back in.
Sure, thanks. So great stuff from Sarah. I think Julie is right. There's gonna be some differences, but a lot of similarities you'll hear from what we bring up. So our project began in February 22. We came from PeopleSoft. We're on PeopleSoft going back to, I believe, 2001, way before I joined at Akron. With PeopleSoft there, we had Oracle had even mentioned we had one of the largest amounts of customizations inventory that they had seen. So ours was customized a lot. So you can imagine that migrating that to Workday, that made it even tougher. But also one of the reasons for us to migrate was we couldn't maintain that anymore with upgrades and anything within that architecture, which is so difficult. And also with that architecture, we had a lot of paper-based processes it mentions there. We weren't very streamlined, very, very, very siloed. And infrastructure, we had infrastructure on site that we had a major upgrade that was coming due. So that kind of prompted us, that cost prompted us to start looking at different options. So we started, RFP was back in, I believe, October, November. So it took us about 5 months to get to actually a project start. Took us about 16 months. We attempted to do it in about 14. We did push our go live back a couple times for a couple of different reasons. But then we were live with platform, and then we started the student project little bit earlier than that. I think it was only about 4 months, maybe 6 months ahead of go live platform. So we had both projects running parallel for a
Yep.
period of time, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But we did our go live for student was a little bit different. We were live for the fall 24 semester. So that cycle for fall 24 admissions begins in December of 23. That was our first go live, and registration was our second go live with other items with that, but that was a big one. All focused on the fall 24 semester, and we kept our PeopleSoft system running through summer of 24. That's our journey.
So Chris, thank you for sharing that. Happy to say that I was with you from day one. It was a fun journey through platform and through student. I will take a moment of personal privilege to say I think it was really your consistency on the project that really helped to make sure that when we cut over from platform and you were using two systems for a little bit of time as we were working on student, really your knowledge has helped the campus during that period of time. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned as part of your project?
Sure, thank you. So I appreciate that. We couldn't have done it without you either. So thank you. The first item here on the partnership with Avaap, one of the things we wanted to watch closely was budget. Obviously, we started in 2022, so you still had a lot of pandemic-related financial concerns in the mix. One of the suggestions we had, and it's been a great collaboration with Avaap, is make sure you define how you're going to control that budget from the beginning. Don't wait till you get into it and start to see maybe you might be falling out of line with your budget. If you have those controls in place early and you monitor it closely, and that's what our project manager, Andrea Nunley, did a great job of collaborating with the engagement managers from Avaap to monitor that very closely. So going to the actual implementation then. One thing I noticed is we have these broken down in platform and student. It doesn't mean we've learned more at platform and student. All those things for platform, those apply to student also. So but we kind of broke them out just because they're a little different. When we started the project, our work stream leads who are critical to the project, as Sarah mentioned, two aspects. One, they're the subject matter experts. Two, and this is one of the big differences between Miami and us, we very rarely were able to break somebody away fully from their previous job and backfill them. So our project team was really focused on maintaining the current system, but also implementing Workday. So that was difficult in itself. But one of the things we learned was those workstream leads need to understand their role on the project. And this is, like Julie said, this is a fun project if you let it be fun. It's difficult. It takes a lot of time. It's a struggle, but you can get through it and have fun. But it's not for everybody, maybe. So if you have some people on your campus that aren't ready to make that change, because it really is a change, not just in the system, like we've heard, but how you work and how you look at things. You want to make sure they understand that role and then make sure it's working out early on. And we had a couple instances where we didn't do that, and then later on in the project we had to really adjust and add some augmentation to our staff to help us get the project done. So make sure that people know what they're in for as they get into it. And I say that comes across as negative. It's not. It could be a good enjoyable time. The tenant management was a thing. I don't know, Sarah, how many of you all have? We had around 15 tenants, I believe, at one time for platform, and then we add some more for student. Making sure that those are managed correctly, and you know that, okay, our financial aid group may be in tenant 10, but our student record is in 11, and when you're doing your testing, making sure that stuff kind of all merges together. So that was something that we had to work through. Facilitate more cross-functional discussion. If you're thinking, questioning, are we having enough cross-functional discussions? You're not. Do more. You can do more and more. It's a lot of meetings for people, but it will pay off in the long run and save you time down the road. With PeopleSoft, like I mentioned, we customized it pretty thoroughly. There's a natural tendency we found for people to say, well, we did it this way in PeopleSoft, let's build it that way in Workday. And if you end up doing there's limitations to that because of just how Workday is more modern and works better. But we found some instances where some of our work streams did that as much as they could in Workday, and we've kind of had to go back and pull that out and readjust or recreate those processes. And security we still have questions on security just because it's new. We just went live with a student for this fall, so that's something that you want to have a lot of conversations on also. So getting to the student, one thing Julie already mentioned, we kept PeopleSoft up and running until really the end of August of 2024. We were live with Workday for all students in April of 24. So that's about 5-6 months where we had to manage two systems, making sure the students and faculty knew to go to Workday for their for certain functions, but others for the fall semester functions, but for the summer semester functions that they had to go back to PeopleSoft. That was a very difficult thing to manage. I think we did the best we could. It ended up being more difficult on our IT security side when you have a student entering for summer admissions and making sure they get to PeopleSoft and then to Workday for their fall term. There was a lot of work there on the technical side. And then one of the things when you're implementing student, and I'll finish up here quickly, I promise. Your platform system, we were live in June of 23. So when we were doing things, we're adding on the student modules into Workday. You're working with the live system there. So you've talked about this, the Power of One. That really hits you then. Before you're live fully with student, you're already experiencing that because you have to make sure you understand if there were data loads or things like that to for the conversion that may impact. You want to time those correctly because that's going to be loaded into your production system. So there were some things there that we had to be careful with. Change management, very similar to what Sarah said, formalize everything you can, try to map it out. We tried to do that the best we could, but and with a project, things change and we got off that a few times. And then the last bullet I think is really, it's already been mentioned, the readiness and making sure everyone on campus takes ownership of things and they're ready to they understand the technology and the process, not just technology, but the processes, because there are a lot of changes there.
So Chris, I think I heard a theme of planning for the unexpected, but yet being flexible as well. So having that plan, working the plan, but being flexible as well. I appreciate that. And I know both of you have really ramped up your activities, traveling road shows, talking more around the campus on things. So why don't we talk a little bit about those even before the lessons learned? I'd love for each of you to share the strategies you've had with sharing communication on the campuses and bringing the message about Workday and how things will be different to the stakeholders.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start if it's all right. So early on, we started a website, Workday Info at Miami University, right? So we've got some people checking the website. We updated it pretty much weekly with some information. We did some traveling road shows. We did some, I want to say that we had a bookable calendar link where offices could book us for a department meeting, 30-minute sessions, hour sessions at their schedule. So we basically cleared our schedule. We have a part of the change management. I had a communications person on our team. I had a training coordinator on the team. So I had some other folks with me, but basically we tried to get out in front of. And so our traveling road shows, we did so many of them in the beginning, and those changed as we knew more information. So we had meetings, we had department meetings, we had big meetings, we had small meetings, we had Zooms, we had virtual. So we did a host of and a variety of different sessions. Website updates, we did some newsletters, we did some email outreaches to all staff, all faculty, just to try to give them some information. We put some materials together in our Canvas LMS, just because obviously Workday wasn't live yet. We needed a place for them to see some of those materials. So I kind of set up some generic, we purchased the adoption kit with Workday. And so some of those generic materials we could surface early and say, this is what a system might look like. It's not going to be ours. but it's going to be basically some of the same functionality. So we tried to hit as many things as we could. And I think finally we hit, before go live, our last year's benefits fair, open enrollment, we had a table there. And so it was pretty much stop by, come see, ask us a question, spin the wheel, generate some excitement, some buzz. We had some giveaways, we made some swag, we got some things to put out. But the theme across that was our website, miamioh.edu/workdayinfo. Everything we put out the door was branded with that. We had our Change Champions network. We had some change ambassadors. So all of those things kind of played into the getting the message across the campus. We have one main campus, two regionals, and I never got a chance to go to the Luxembourg campus. I'm really sad about that. So, but there you go.
So Chris, I know
That
you
is
took
cool.
a similar approach to your road shows. Do you and you I think you had a table at one point in the student union
Mhm.
to talk to students, right?
Yeah,
You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
yeah, all very similar to websites. Another thing we really enjoy, I think campus liked it too, Workday Wednesday messages and our daily digest for staff. But yeah, we had a couple celebrations in our student union that all of campus was invited to. Had some pretty good attendance there. Cookies helped with that. We did do a table at student union, trying to get this was just prior to the go live for students and the first one. And we had, students walking in the hallway on their phones, which I'll come back to. And we were trying to get their attention. So one of the things we did as part of this project was My Akron as our portal. We changed that up to an intranet, and it was a brand new version. So we started, like, we're in the mall saying, hey, did you know My Akron is changing? And then all of a sudden, like, what? That's where I go to do everything. So that got their attention. So the table was good. We did road shows, just like Sarah mentioned. Those were very popular. We preferred when we went in person. Some of the colleges preferred to do them remote, online. They were better in person, I think, better conversation, better engagement from the audience. We did a lot of forums, and many of those were online, on different specific topics. So almost like a little training, but it was ahead of time. So just a kind of a preview to get people thinking what it's going to look like. And then our favorite event was the mock semester that Julie actually attended for us. We had, I believe, Julia, what ended up being about 150 faculty and students there that came in person in a lab and got their hands for the first time on Workday Student. That was great, and it did help that we had our mascot Zippy. They're also pulling people in. We were in the Arts and Sciences building, so there's an open hallway, and students going to classes, Zippy would get them in, and cookies too.
Chris, one of the things I
So-
want to add. Oh, I'm so sorry, Analia.
No, I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say food and mascots, right?
Yes.
And
Food mascots.
And giveaways because let me add
That's right. I
that
forgot about the gift basket. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
and not just gift baskets. We actually had one of the team members for the OCM team from the registrar's office, right? Chris, I think she was
Yep,
from the
yep.
registrar's office.
Mhm.
She said another way we could get the campus departments involved is having each of the campus departments sponsor like a raffle, a basket for the mock semester. So we have one, sponsored from athletics, one from the foundation. And it was another, you heard Chris and Sarah both say, you have to inject some fun, right? These are long projects. They can be super stressful at times. And it's really about the technology is important. And I know our wonderful Workday colleagues are on here, and Workday is a fantastic technology. I'm a little biased that it's really a people project, right? So people really do enjoy being recognized of, hey, this is stressful, but how do we also make it somewhat relaxed at times, right? So Chris, I just want to say, wanted to bring up the raffle, the baskets, I'm sorry, because I thought that was an interesting and fun way to get the different departments involved in mock semester.
Yeah, and they really enjoyed that too. So that, just real quick, because I thought about it, change management, you think about just general campus and can you use a system? We learned somewhere in the middle of the platform project that, we have these people on a project, the workstream leads, they're deep into it, they're building out the new processes and that. It's a change for them also. So we kind of, if you remember that, Julia, we kind of reset and said, okay, we need to make sure we're taking care of them as well. Because we just thought they're in the project, so they know, oh yeah, that's a change. They know it. No, they needed to be taken care of as well. And I have used the word empathy a lot of times in the past when I explained how we got through the hard parts of it. Julie, like Julie mentioned, it can be fun, but sometimes you kind of just need to let people vent a little bit and talk with them and know we're all in this together. And that was very helpful for us too, because it's like Julie said, there's work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done, especially if you're still doing your day job along with your
Right.
implementation.
Right. And
It's just
Chris, I want to pick up,
yeah.
I want to pick up on that reset point that you
Mm-hmm.
just made. How did you reset since you all are now at the end of your deployment and student is live? Congratulations. How did you reset and take those lessons learned from platform and utilize them? And then I'll go to you, Sarah, with the same question.
So I do think I was looking at a different slide earlier that explained that a little bit. Andrea Nunley, our project manager, and I, so I guess for the whole project, not just change, but we really did sit down. We had a new group of people coming on the project. They were involved maybe tangentially, they're employees, so they would see Workday, but we handled a little differently when we created the work streams or identified the work stream leads for the student groups. With some of the things we learned prior, we had a much better idea of what it was going to be like for that role, defining that role. So we knew that. So we were honest with them. And we knew there was some, culturally, there was some pushback, not wanting to do this because they knew some of the work that needed to be done. But we were just upfront with them, honest, and told them we were there to help. And Avaap was there to help, and we would bring in other resources if we needed to. So yeah, I think just that honest and openness, making sure everyone knows what it's going to be like was helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some more evaluation of what the roles were. And I think Sarah, we've talked about that as well. After you have that understanding of what the teams are really going to be in the midst of, because even though you hear it, you don't really understand it until it's your daily life. How have you all taken lessons learned from the platform and your recent go live now that you're taking into student? And we can go to the next slide, Amy.
Possibly the one after that. Sure. So what I'll say is that with the platform deployment, with it being the HCM, the finance area, we did have a smaller scope of the university population involved. We had our Change Champion network. We had 40 folks from all the different divisions that typically interacted with our personnel in our finance system. When we shift to the student project, we will expand that to the other divisions and departments that deal with students, not just our registrar, not just our bursar, but our Department of Student Life, Student Health and Wellness. Some of those other ASG, our student government team, is going to be involved in the project as well, because it's the voices that the students recognize and hear from all the time. Where on the finance side, it was okay to kind of keep that leadership and that group and the management and the leads, to a smaller kind of subset area. We kept a little bit of consistency with our technical lead, but we swapped out. So we have a couple of development teams that are on the technical side of the project. Two of the development teams were heavily invested in and knew all of our financial and payroll kind of existing setup. So they knew the data. Well, they're not the ones that support now Banner Student. And so our technical development teams are shifting. And so we're bringing in those other two teams that kind of know and support student now for Banner, and they'll be engaged in the project. So we did a little bit of shift, but we kept some consistency at the lead level. And then in general, just kind of making sure that we expanded the scope. And so our Change Champion group is also going to change out. We're going to have more folks on the student side. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, how we're changing over. And making sure we communicate that, to Chris's point, you will be in two systems for the next 2 years. You might only ever need Workday for employee stuff, but you might need Banner for something else. And so talking to them about what that means when you are going to ask a question or get into a system. What are you going to do? Which system are you going to need to get into? So we definitely have that kind of in mind.
Well, I would like to add just one quick thing. I paused there for a second thinking about project management versus change management. And the reason I paused was our project manager, Andrea Nunley, and I worked hand in hand throughout the project. So in our case, change management, project management, it was all the same thing. We were working together because it's a people project, like we've mentioned many times. it needs to be that way. So the technology, you have your technology project plan, but along with that, the readiness of campus goes along on that same timeline. And you can't just build it all out and then, okay, let's just train everybody now. It's a continuous process for change management and project management throughout that timeline.
I'll agree with you, Chris. We could not have done it. So Kent, my project manager, we were back to back, side to side, but then also our Avaap project manager and the Avaap OCM lead. Again, we're, two in a box kind of thing, but you could not have done it one without the other. So agreed with that.
It really takes a village. It's not just a saying. A strong village. And I think, Chris, you hit it on the head too, that it's about the relationships. It's not if something happens, it's when. You're going to have to work through those things together. But if you've taken the time to support the team, listen to each other, build those trusting relationships, you can get through them. And you both are shining examples of the making it through the project successfully and having these wonderful outcomes and transformation projects to talk about. So it's been exciting to see you go through this. I want to give us a couple of minutes to open up for questions. There was a question about that period of time when platform is live and you're still letting finance and financial aid come from your legacy system, whether it be PeopleSoft or Banner. And there are other things that are coordinated as the student project is going on that we make sure is going through. There was a question about the how you message information about Workday, that especially understanding the culture of higher education and how things are communicated and maybe how they're worded, and that things that come from Workday may be a little more corporate. How did you, I don't even know what the word is, higher educationize? That's not even a word. We're going to coin a new term today. How did you make it appropriate for the culture of your institution? And I'll go to Chris first.
On that second question about the messaging.
Yes.
I think one of the things we did, engineers, real quick, we had a plan kind of before Julia came on our project of how we wanted to do things. And then Julia came with her plan, and Avaap is great. Julia is great about merging those together. It's not like, no, you have to do what we want you to do. It was just, it was a true collaboration. But anyway, to answer your question, I think it's, we had an understanding of our different constituent groups. So that messaging may be different to faculty than the students, than the staff, and different types of staff, so I think just making sure you focus on the recipient of that message and understanding what they will see in that message, and not necessarily just sending a bunch of facts, but actually putting it in a way that you feel they could understand it. And that's a continuous, you improve on that as you learn more and more. I think that's the key, understanding the recipient.
And I'll say that we did a little bit of a terminology, kind of a glossary. Here's what Workday calls it, and here's what we used to know it as. We did that. That helped a lot. One of the focuses that we did, though, was to try to point out the fact that Workday as a system is global. It's not just higher ed. And so we wanted to say, kind of basically break out of your little silo of higher ed. This is a global system, right? So we kind of gave them a little bit of that exposure while we were trying to make sure that we could couch the message of stop the special snowflake processes, no customization, like we're trying to do Workday as is. And so we did a little bit of that, but it was terminology, as Chris mentioned, it was kind of hitting the different audiences, but it was really exposing the scope and scale of where Workday is in the world, to kind of give them that broader perspective of the corporate language that still sits in Workday now.
Chris, Sarah's comment made me think of the student who came to mock semester. I don't know if you remember, they sat in the front row on the far left-hand side. And this student was actually graduating from Akron that semester. So we started talking to them and we're like, well, thanks for coming, but you're not even going to use Workday since you're graduating. And they said, I know, but a lot of businesses use Workday. And I would like to say that I was part, of a mock semester testing event. So Sarah, I think to your point, I think that's a really good one, right? So as Chris said, we have to understand the audience. We have to really contextualize the message and to be transparent. Right. if it's just an okay thing, we say that it's just an okay thing. If it's a workday win, then we say it's a workday win. But I think it's really making sure that you're being deliberate and intentional by thinking of the audience and then contextualizing your message. And some students are going to be really excited that they're being exposed to Workday at your institution prior to starting their professional lives. And I thought that was a really interesting comment from that one student at Akron, Chris.
Yeah, I agree. I do remember that.
Yeah, and speak just on that, I think that you have both reflected on how different student messaging may need to be than what you're sending out to employees. I love hearing Chris and Andrea talk about when they had their first table to answer questions from students on Workday, like when registration was underway, because Workday was very intuitive for the user experience for students. Chris, how many students stopped at the table that day?
We didn't have they knew how to do it. And
That's
one
right.
thing about the phones, the mobile capabilities that are in Workday, we didn't have any of that in PeopleSoft, and that was a game changer right there. So
Yeah. What kind of mobile percentages are you seeing? It's pretty
right now we're
amazing.
at 39, all logins were about 39% mobile. That's
Oh,
staffing and
wow.
student. So that's, yeah, we're pretty happy with that.
That's wonderful. And we have other questions coming in. Sarah, how have you, so now you're almost in, and I guess you both are kind of in the life after. And so change management and change leadership does not stop after the deployment. You said you're not exactly involved with student, but you're still very active in the project. So how does your role transition after you've gone live? What does change management look like for you at this point?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm still involved in some of the steering team meetings. I still put my perspective in. I am going to be heavily engaged when integrations come, and support for platform is going to require that interaction between the student team and what is currently live in production and platform. So I'm going to not be free of Workday. I don't want to be free of Workday and the project for the next 2 years. I'm super happy to still be engaged, but then in a different role where it's not so fully just the implementation. Now I'm looking at live support, but also, oh, hey, we're going to have this thing. How do we bring it in to the point of our users using the system? We are continuing those Workday Wednesdays. We are finding reporting questions, conversations, new training sessions, new functionality, right? It's always updating. And so it's constant change. How do we manage that? We just try to make a resource place for them to go to. So I've got some Google groups for our people to join in and ask questions. And we're really finding a great number of crowdsourcing. The peers are answering their own questions in this great Workday at Miami Google chat group that I've started. So, I mean, it's fabulous to see the interactions with folks like that. So I'm super excited to see that continue.
I love that. And Chris, your support role has also changed significantly because you're live. And so you're now supporting live student registration, financial aid disbursements, in addition to, a couple of years on HR financials. So you are now also supporting releases. What does that look like for change management? Letting folks know what's out there and what's changing with Workday regularly.
So yeah, we built a support model with business analysts. We centralized some staff and then hired some business analysts for each of the core areas: HR, finance, and student. And one of their main roles are those releases. So when we get the notes, that team starts to go through it. They start to kind of highlight the things that may impact us, work with their functional areas, and then by the time Sandbox Preview is updated to the new release, I think then we have 2 months or maybe a little less to then do the testing. I believe it is 2 months. And then we know that when that release hits, that it's not going to cause us any issues because we've already done our testing and implemented new functionality. I think that's the part with change management that we want to change our approach. The first 2 releases, after we were live, it was okay. This is what you need to know. This is how the requisition form is going to change. That's great. We can do that. What we're looking forward to now, especially with student, is this next release is not that we're just there for making sure people can still do their work. That needs to happen. but we also want to market that new functionality that's coming out in the releases, because there's a ton on the student side. And we want to make sure that all the people know, hey, this new item for registration is going to be a game changer, instead of just letting it happen and just getting out what they need to know,
Right.
what we really want them to know moving forward.
Right.
So we're kind of,
So
I
you're
guess,
starting to
kind of
build
enhancing
the
everything.
excitement. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. That's great. And we have been honored to support you all in post-production AMS, if you all need assistance. And so it's nice to know that you're not just on your own. If you would like some help there, we're always happy to do
Right.
that. It has been such
Yeah.
an honor to be with both of you throughout your journey and see both each of you transform during your time on the project and really take ownership of the project and leadership with change. And I know that Julia is a proud or change leader and is just, as this has been made her day. She loves it. So it has been a pleasure to be with you on your journey, and we so appreciate the time that you have given to us today, sharing your experiences and your expertise since you have walked through this. I'm going to turn it over to Amy for some final thoughts. And if we have any last questions come in, we'll handle those in the chat, but we really appreciate everyone's time. Amy?
Thanks, Analia. Thanks, everybody. I mentioned earlier that today's session is part of our larger Pivot to Workday series. So I just wanted to make sure before we parted ways, you all saw that we have a whole bunch of other events going on between now and January. We would love for you to join future sessions listed here. The format may differ a little bit. Today was more of a webinar format. We may do smaller, more intimate roundtable conversations. For those of you who are attending EDUCAUSE, we'll have in-person roundtables for those clients that are migrating from Banner and Colleague on Ellucian systems. We're going to get more into some technical discussions in November and December, and then into some student topics earlier into next year. And you can register for these events via this QR code. We're going to be sending you this information via email. If you prefer more of a one-to-one conversation or taking a deeper dive into today's topics, for example, you can feel free to reach out to me. My information's right here, or your Workday account executive. We'd be happy to have a separate conversation with you and members of your institution. Again, you'll get the recording, you'll get the deck. And I just also want to say thank you to Sarah from Miami and Chris from Akron. We can't thank you enough for the partnership and sharing your knowledge and expertise today. Analia and Julia, our facilitators, and then all of you for joining us. So appreciate the time, and I think we'll call it a day. Give you all 6 minutes back. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, team.
Thank
Bye.
you.